Hi young adults, for this video you will need your Module 10 notes out and you will need some blank paper to take notes on. The focus of this video for today is going to be types of neurons, so we'll talk about motor, sensory, and interneurons, and the two communication systems within your body, which are the nervous system and the endocrine system. So make sure you have your Module 10 notes out and some blank paper to start with. Okay? So the first thing that I want to talk about are the two ways to communicate within your body. So the first one that we touched on already is the idea of the nervous system. Okay? The nervous system uses neurons to communicate within itself. Now the nervous system is obviously divided into several different pieces, right? You've got the central, the peripheral, and then you start subdividing those. And we'll go through those in the next video. But in general, two ways to communicate within your body. The first one, nervous system, it uses neurons. We refer to it as being electrochemical, right? So part of this process of communication using a neuron is electrical, right? And that part is referring like to action potentials. Right, the action potential with the positive ions moving into the axon, that is the idea of it being electrical, right? So I'll put positive, negative for charges within the axon. The chemical piece of the nervous system, specifically a neuron, right? The chemical piece is the use of neurotransmitters. Remember, neurotransmitters are chemicals that cross the synapse and they can bind with receptor sites. Okay, so when we talk about the nervous system, we talk about being electrochemical. The electro part is the action potential going down the axon into the terminal buttons, activating vesicles that have neurotransmitters, and then those neurotransmitters are the chemical piece. Right, they cross the synapse, they bind with receptor sites, and the process continues with the next neuron. Okay, so that's the first system to communicate within your body, and we'll talk about the subdivisions in the next video. The second system, which it talks about this in Module 10, is the endocrine system. Typically speaking, the endocrine system is a much slower chemical system. It secretes hormones, which are chemicals, into your bloodstream. So the main process of the endocrine system is going to use your bloodstream to circulate the messages to the different parts of your body, right? So the endocrine system is made up of a series of glands, right? So examples would be like your adrenal glands, your pituitary gland, which controls growth, your thyroid, your parathyroid. These are all things that you should have in your notes. They were in a picture in your textbook, right? So one of the most important things I'll just emphasize right now is the pituitary gland. This is considered the master gland of the endocrine system. So this gland controls all the other pieces of the endocrine system. So that's why it's considered the master gland. It is also in charge of growth, right? So it will secrete hormones that are evident when you are growing. Okay, so once again, the two systems, you have the nervous system, you have the endocrine system. The nervous system is much faster in terms of responses. The endocrine system is much slower because it's depending on your bloodstream specifically to circulate, right? So the hormones get secreted into your bloodstream to carry those messages to the different glands in your body. Okay, now at some point, these two systems have to talk to each other, right? Like these two systems have to work in conjunction with each other. So I'm going to just put it off to the side. How do these two systems interact? right? What's the piece that allows these two systems to talk to each other? Because one needs to know what the other one is doing, right? And so the answer is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a structure in the brain. So it makes it part of the nervous system, right? So the hypothalamus is a structure in the brain. So it makes it part of the nervous system. And the hypothalamus actually controls the pituitary gland. So the way that these two systems talk to each other is through the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus will talk to the pituitary gland, which is ironic because the pituitary gland is supposed to be the master gland, but the master gland has its own master, which is the hypothalamus. So these are the two systems in your body that allow it to communicate, and we'll break each one of these down into a little bit more detail. But in terms of these two systems, we'll kind of go back to the nervous system first. So in the nervous system, okay, in the nervous system, you have types of neurons. So I'm just going to put, what are the types of neurons? Right? So we talked about the neuron being the basic building block of the nervous system. But what are the different types? Okay, so the first one we'll talk about is referred to as sensory neurons. They're also known as afferent neurons. Sensory neurons are neurons that carry incoming information from sensory receptors to the brain and spinal cord. So once again, sensory neurons, these are the neurons that are going to be activated by information coming in from your environment. So when you think about touch, right? So you have specific receptors in your skin that respond to pressure, right? So that pressure is going to trigger sensory neurons to carry that message, right, of being touched, if you will. It's going to carry that information from the sensory receptors that respond to pressure towards the spinal cord. So I'm going to do my best to kind of draw. You know how great of an artist I am. I'm going to draw a person. Okay. And so let's say like someone wants to give you a high five. This is my hand. Okay. This is from someone else. There's the hand. So someone is going to touch you, right? They're going to give you a high five. So what that would mean is that those sensory neurons pick up the touch and they carry it towards your brain and spinal cord, right? So that message is going down the length of your arm, right? Because you're picking it up in your hand. It's going down the length of your arm to the spinal cord, okay? Which takes us to our second type of neuron. Our second type of neuron are interneurons, okay? Interneurons are neurons within the brain and spinal cord, right? Neurons within the brain and spinal cord. Those are all interneurons. Inter meaning between. So the brain, right? So this is my brain and the spinal cord. Okay. Those are all interneurons. So the message of pressure, right? Someone's giving you a high five, picked up by sensory neurons, carried down the length of your arm to other sensory neurons. So sensory neuron, all the way to your spinal cord. At that point, it communicates the message to interneurons. Interneurons carry that message up to the brain. Your brain thinks about it through the firing of action potentials of interneurons in the brain. And then that message saying, like, move your hand, goes from interneurons all the way down your spinal cord, still using interneurons, which takes us to the third step, which are motor neurons. Motor neurons carry information from the spinal cord to your muscles. And these are also called efferent neurons. Okay? Efferent neurons. So in this case, if you want to move your hand, let's say actually hit the person's hand back, that information will go down your spinal cord with interneurons, and then it will go to motor neurons that will connect the muscles of your hand, telling you to move your hand so you can slap the other person's hand in response. Right? So sensory neurons receive information from your senses. It can be touch, it could be sight, it could be hearing. They receive the information, they carry it towards the interneurons. Interneurons make up your brain and spinal cords. The message goes up. Interneurons in the brain respond, thinking through, come back down the spinal cord, and then it would connect to a motor neuron, which would tell you to contract your muscles. Okay? So that's kind of the overview of the different types of neurons.